Okay, here we are. I've been looking forward to this one because ever since I created Culturevist, like I wanted a space to be able to go deep with people about okay, how are things actually happening? Like we know what people say, we know what people try, but like what actually happens? What do we learn? What can we adapt for ourselves? I feel like today we're going to have one of those conversations. So, with that, would you like to introduce yourself for people watching?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you, Matt, for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Luke, head of culture at a company called Redico. We're a digital marketing company specializing in SEO. And I suppose back in 2017, 2018, we went on a real kind of cultural radical shift to become more progressive and completely change the way that the company works from a culture point of view. And I suppose that's led to where we are today as I think it's the fourth best place to work in the UK, which is really cool. But all because of the way we changed the company back in 2017.
Pretty strong, pretty strong intro. Nice one. And if we start with your like personal journey before we then get onto the company, so how did you end up? What's been your journey to being focused on culture?
Yeah, so my journey's a very strange one because I initially started off in journalism and a very different career path to where I am now. In fact, so I joined Redico back in 2012, not 2012, sorry, 2014. And after, I suppose, when we were looking at this cultural kind of shift, I was working in more of like an operational setting within the company. And I kind of fell into culture rather than kind of meaning to move into it because we needed someone to roll out all of these changes in terms of creating a space where we could not have managers, or we could give complete freedom to everyone within the team and let them work when and how and where they want to, by letting people set their own targets. There was all of these things we needed to do as a company. And at the time, I was the person best placed to be able to do this. So I kind of fell into it. And then from that, just really grew and embraced kind of culture and these progressive movements and these ideas and these theories. And I've just kind of, yeah, just taken it from there, I suppose, from a personal side of things.
And which, so given now your focus, which aspects of culture are you most interested in?
Yeah, I mean, culture is obviously a real diverse subject. At the moment, my focus is on self-management principally, and creating these self-managed teams who can organize themselves and be responsible for themselves and have the trust and freedom and the responsibility from the company to be able to do this, which is something that those kind of three words, like trust, freedom, responsibility, they're words that a lot of companies don't have a lot of or think they do, but they actually don't. And they're really, really important when it comes to self-management and giving people the keys and the power to be able to get things done and to change the way they work. So for me, it's that freeing people up to be able to work in a way that's right for them and changing, I suppose, the system that we've always thought is right, but is actually broken in a lot of sense, in a lot of cases.
Yeah, one of the things that helps me manage my uh, frustration levels, stress levels, well-being levels throughout my kind of years of working has been I often I often would be in the company saying, "Oh, it's like broken, it's not working," and then after a while, I realized actually that's how I see it. And for a bunch of the people who are in the senior management team, for example, it might be working just fine for them because they're getting their monthly pay. They might be close to retirement. And okay, you could say there's a cost for the status quo. Like all the things that I thought were broken, I'd be like, oh, yeah, here's the cost of that. Here's the problem with that. For them, if it didn't hit their kind of short term like reward, and if they didn't have the kind of intrinsic shared values, then actually they're incentivized to not change it and actually keep it broken in some cases. So
Yeah.
that mindset shift helped me at times and think, okay, if that's the case, then how should I change my approach?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've hit the nail on the head there, because values is another key part of this, and aligning people and values within the company, and having that kind of shared purpose behind what people actually want and what they want to achieve. As you mentioned, a lot of times there's people in the company that see these issues that others don't, and that was very similar to us. So when we started this culture journey, it was feedback from the team around unnecessary micromanagement or inconsistencies in decisions and what people were and weren't allowed to do. And all of this was building up frustrations within people because they just weren't sure what they could and couldn't do. And it seemed like some people could do something they couldn't. So for example, why can this person turn up at 10 o'clock in the morning and I can't? Or why can they leave at 3? Or why can they work at home? And a different line manager might say, yeah, you can work from home, but another one might say no. And so there's all of these frustrations that people in the team see on a daily basis. But yeah, you're right. People in upper management, senior management, leadership positions just don't see that and don't address those problems head on. And you will only find those problems and those issues if you speak to the team directly.
Yeah. Well, sometimes they know about it and they just don't want to change it.
Yeah, which is a big issue as well. You need buy-in from the senior people. We were fortunate enough that this was spearheaded by the directors of the company, who had always wanted to create a great place to work. So it'd always been fun as a company. We'd spent lots of money on nights out and events and beer fridges and going away on holiday and things like that as a team. So all these great things, but they realized that was no longer enough, and that all of these little issues that were bubbling beneath the surface needed to be dealt with and tackled. But that we were it was kind of like a luxury position where the directors saw this and wanted to make those changes. A lot of businesses aren't fortunate in that the senior people don't see that, which is a major problem.
So let's start to get into this then. So if we start with, so you mentioned self-managed teams. I know it's a topic that is written about, talked about a lot. It's one that I think has been probably written about for decades. In your kind of view, like, what do you understand self-management to be or look like in a company?
Yeah, I mean, to start with, I think it's looking at the way we work in a different way. So questioning why we do the things we do, and do we need to do it that way? So when you look at a typical company, a traditional kind of the way it's run, you will have managers, you will have middle managers, it'll be a sort of a hierarchy of power. But why do we do that? So what's the benefits that we see from that? And it's one of those things where we've always done it, so let's just do it because it works. Well, a lot of the time it doesn't work, and by having sort of that management structure in place, maybe you're taking away the ability for other people to step up and to hold themselves accountable and to become more responsible. So first of all, self-management or thinking about a different way of working is about questioning why we do what we do. And things like management come back from production lines in the Industrial Revolution, and that was hundreds of years ago. So why do we still need to have something like that in place in today's work? So do we need that? Do we have to have it? Maybe people could set their own targets. Why can't people do that? Just because we've always had it that targets are set top down and people follow the system, why can't we do it in a different way? Why can't people be responsible and accountable for their own goals? Why do we say you have to take 20 days holiday a year? Because we've always done it. Well, why can't we say, well, you can take as much holiday as you want as long as you get the work done? Let's focus on output. Why do we care about how many hours you work, how many days holiday you take, how many sick days you have, if you work from home, how you work? Because the input ultimately doesn't matter. And again, all of these outdated systems and metrics for measuring performance just don't work because they're outdated. All that really matters is the output, the performance, the happiness of your clients, whatever it is that the metrics are. That's what really important. So self-management is about changing those systems, questioning why we do some of these old-fashioned traditional things, and creating a solution where you're bringing more accountability and more responsibility to individual teams, individuals, whatever it might be. And rather than working for a boss or for someone who's literally whipping people to hit targets, it's about these people coming together and creating their own goals and their own, I suppose, shaping their own destiny and how they work and holding themselves better to account for that, and giving people more responsibility. I kind of come back to that whole trust, freedom, responsibility, and that's the three words that you get with self-management. It's giving people more trust to be able to manage themselves in the right way, having that responsibility to be able to do it, and having the freedom to be able to work in a way that's right for them as well.
Thank you for sharing that. It helps kind of put it in context, people who may not be so familiar with it, to see how you see it. So if we get into some examples, could you give us some examples of how of things you're doing in your company that might be different to the traditional?
Yeah, so I suppose the first one would be management. And the reason I suppose this is really important is because managers are often promoted for the wrong reasons. So in a typical sort of sales environment, say in a company, you would have a head of sales. So say they leave, the chances are the person that's the best at sales in the company will then become the new head of sales, which is great. You've got the person who's really good at their job in a managerial role. However, what's often disregarded is the people element of being a manager. So there's this crazy stat. I think 49% of people would take a pay cut to have a different manager, and 85% of people feel they could do a better job than their manager. So there's all of these sort of weird numbers which show that actually the way that managers work is often having a detrimental impact on the wider team. And just because they're good at their job doesn't mean they're good at them managing other people and having those kind of people skills where they can grow people, motivate people, empower people, support people. So I suppose we've taken that approach and we've kind of split the manager role in half. So you have people that are good at strategy and good at sort of growing an area of the business, and they have that expertise. But then you also have people that are really good with others and can help to coach and motivate and support other people. And what we have is a system where people choose their own coach. So they choose the person who they feel is the best person for them in that coaching people sense. And then by that way, the manager role is completely, I suppose, broken apart and just doesn't appear anymore. And then you can go even sort of further in that. And what we've done with the teams, or what we're doing at the moment, is looking at all of these traditional roles that a manager might have, like hiring and firing and training, all of these types of roles here, and then getting teams to talk to each other and say, okay, who's the best person in this team to do this job? And so one of the things might be conflict mediation. And so and then the team might say, well, actually, this person's skill set is really, he or she is really good at conflict mediation, a nice, calm sort of persona who would be great in this situation. Maybe they should do it. Or this person would be really good at hiring or recruiting or being involved in these situations. And suddenly distributing these different roles amongst a team removes a management sort of need. And so there's all of these different roles that a manager might have, or a need for a manager, but they can be distributed within the team. And you've suddenly got a team that's more accountable and self-managing and working together rather than for someone.
So one of the things I've tried to do previously is say, okay, forget these broad job roles and titles that we have. People should just have tags, for want of a better word, of things of like ways they add value. Yeah. So it might be, okay, my tags might be people manager, I'm great at this, and so on. And then also I'd have things that I want to develop. And so I think I understand and I appreciate it's, okay, what are the things that we think need to be done? Let's split them up and then look at who's best for it. So what happens? You don't have to have you don't have to have answers for these. I'm just going to share some of the things that
I go for it.
So on the people choose their, so you had managers, and now you're like, okay, you separate it up, and the kind of some of the people development stuff is done by a coach, and the colleagues select their coach. What happens if a coach isn't selected, if people don't want to be coached by that person?
So I mean, I suppose that does happen. So what we had at the start was we had people put themselves forward as a coach, and the main caveat, I suppose, in picking a coach is you can't pick someone from your own department. And so what that does is, because I suppose the coaching side of things and the way that coaching should work is it's creating a space of reflection and getting people to find their own answers. And by picking someone who is in your own department, the chances are, or it's much easier for them to give you answers and solutions to problems that you might have. Whereas a good coach is maybe someone that doesn't have any knowledge of your experience and what you're trying to do, but can be a good mirror and a good place to reflect and help you find some good answers and ways of moving forward in that. So people put themselves forward for this coaching position, and some people weren't picked, and they've kind of stayed in the system and they're still working with other coaches, and other people have been picked at a later date or have decided they don't want to. So at the end of the day, it's down to the individual in terms of who they pick. And obviously, you want everyone to be picked as from a nicety side of things, but it doesn't always work. And I think it's just important for people to be able to find. It's more important for the person who's picking to find the person that's right for them, the person they feel comfortable talking to.
I've got so many questions. I'm trying to work out which ones to ask. How does, like, do you have the concept of performance evaluation? Like, if someone joins, they have a salary. How's the salary kind of calculated? Is it in bands? Is it like how's that done, the salary thing? And then how is performance assessed? And then how does that impact salary and reward and benefits?
Yeah, so the first thing that's really important here is to completely separate performance reviews and salary. So typically in a normal business, you would have an annual review and you would have salary as part of that. Now, the reason this should be separated is because this meeting turns into money rather than about performance. And so someone said to me before that for them, what it feels like is you go into your annual review and you're trying to convince someone to give you more money, and your manager is trying to manage their budget. And so performance just gets left to one side and just doesn't get talked about at all. So to start with, they should be completely separate, because at the end of the day, if it's any kind of review, you want to be talking about performance. And also, if you're talking about salary at the same time, people aren't honest and open because they don't want to show weakness. They don't want to show any reason why they shouldn't get a salary bump or more money. And so they don't have these open, honest conversations where they can reflect and really learn and talk about anything they want to improve on and their success and things like that. That's really important. So, I mean, the way we do it is we scrapped annual appraisals straight away. So we've not had annual appraisals for 2 years now. Instead, we have a check-in that we do with the coaches every quarter. This is, I suppose, and again, what we're trying to do is create a really positive experience in these check-ins. Again, because a lot of people dread annual appraisals and annual reviews because they're expecting to kind of walk into a room and their manager to say, like, this is what you've done wrong, or these are your weaknesses, or this is what you need to do next quarter, and these are your goals and how you're going to do it. But instead, we kind of want to create this positive experience where it's all about success, aspirations, what you've achieved, what you want to do next, where you want to grow, how you feel like you're doing in line with the values of the company, and how happy you are in the role. And so we have this with the coach each quarter. Again, it all comes from the individual talking about it and showing what they think, rather than a manager sort of talking 80% of the time as you would do normally. And then from a salary side, we introduce a salary panel. So again, everything that we do at Redico is very democratic. We have a lot of votes, whether it's on like what the values of the company should be or how a process or a new system should work. We do a lot of feedback, do a lot of votes. People probably get fed up with the amount of forms that I bombard them with for feedback about different areas of the business. But we created this salary panel, and again, we had a democratic vote, so people kind of picked who they thought should be on the panel. And then every year, sort of January time, the finance team kind of work out how much money is in the pot for the year for salary increases. And then anyone that wants to apply for a salary can apply to that panel. Again, they then can make the decisions and share that with the person based on their decision. So it will be based on things like how much that role has changed, or their experience has increased, or how much training they've done to kind of improve in their role. And then the onus is on that person to kind of explain it and be kind of really open and transparent about where they think they are, and also how much money they think they should be on. So we have like marketplace reviews, which are sort of available as well, which kind of show this is kind of what the average is for the role that people are in, and I suppose like junior or senior positions in that role. And I suppose that then gives the person that opportunity to apply if they feel that they should get one. And the panel can speak to people, because obviously you may not know exactly what that person's doing on a day-to-day basis, but you can still speak to other people in the team and kind of clarify situations and get some advice elsewhere. But it's about kind of creating that democratic place where people can apply for an increase and feel like they've been heard.
It's good of you. It's really good of you to share how it's working. So you mentioned like voting. So for decision making, are there like quite a few instances where it will be everyone's vote is equal and there isn't more of a weighting of votes for people in certain roles? Or I imagine it might depend on the decision that's being made, but can you share, like, do you have different types of decision making processes?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the vote stuff, there's no weighting at all. So a good example of that is recently we completely changed the values of the company.
Yeah.
And so we had 6 values before, which were good values, but they probably weren't right anymore for us and where we had come from, because we've changed so much over the years. So we thought, right, we need to change the values. So we had sort of brainstorms within the team, people sort of saying their ideas around where the company was and what kind of words and phrases we could start using. I went away and I created these new values that we could potentially use and presented those to the team. And I suppose this is a good example of where weighting doesn't apply, because 2 of the directors of the business really liked the first set of values, but a lot of other people in the team didn't. And ultimately, I then adapted them to go with the people that actually, the other people in the team who had other valid reasons for like that majority of people didn't like it. In a traditional company, if the director or the shareholder says, I like that, I want to go with that, you would just you would go with it. But you have to, so the open-mindedness of the directors and the shareholders to be able to sort of understand that there's other views in the company and they might not always be right is really good and really needed, necessary. So that's really important when it comes to weighting. In terms of other decision-making processes, we're in the process of launching the advice process, which for those who don't know that, it's, I suppose in layman's terms, it's, you first of all need to know what your responsibilities are within the company. So I'd be responsible for X, X, and X. So this is what I can make a decision on. However, before I make a decision on it, I have to seek advice from anyone who would be a stakeholder in that. After I've sought that advice, I can then disregard it, or I can take some of it on board and then make a decision on how I want to proceed. And so we're still in the process of rolling that out, but everyone in the team will then be able to make decisions based on this advice process. So they'll know what their responsibilities are, what they're accountable for, what areas of the business they can change, and then can make those decisions by seeking advice and then deciding how they run with that going forward.
I'm smiling because you said the word that I was thinking about, which is accountability, because it does, like, a lot of people think, oh, self-management and just getting advice, it might make things looser, and not as like, maybe there's not as much clarity around decision making or expectations or accountability. But I feel as though actually it changes the focus of accountability, because actually if people have that sense of responsibility and know that they're going to be held to account for that, then it doesn't remove it, it just changes the way it's done.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is creating more engagement in what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. There's like these silly stats where only 15% of people are actually engaged in what they do. And so the whole thing around building a better culture and a better way of doing things is to increase engagement and drive more engagement. And by creating accountability, by looking at sort of the mastery and the purpose and the autonomy and all that kind of stuff, you can create more engagement. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And that's exactly what other companies should be looking at trying to do as well.
Yeah. In our conversations, I'm trying really hard to keep this concise. So we won't, like, we could talk for hours, or I could ask you questions for hours. But we're going to keep it concise. One thing I did want to do is like start to go deeper. So I'm going to ask one where it might not be so clear, at least to me, and then we'll look to kind of just wrap it up after with another one. So again, a lot of people talk about not necessarily like measuring input, the amount of hours people work, when and where they work.
Yeah.
It's about the outcome. In practice, so say a team member thinks, okay, well, I want this flexibility. I want to work it. Here's how I want to work at these times and so on to achieve this outcome. If they are doing a collaborative thing and they need to collaborate with others and they have similar thoughts around, well, actually, I want to work at these times. And if I'm not being measured, I want to take a week off for this point. How does it work in practice when you've got to coordinate input to achieve an outcome? My guess is it's up to them to decide themselves rather than senior management saying, this is how you do it.
Yep.
How does it work for you?
Yeah, so there's no approval process in place at all for taking annual leave or working from home or what hours you choose. It's all up to the individual to manage that themselves. So it's not like someone approves X, Y, or Z. I think to put it, sort of summarize it, it's creating an adult environment where adults make the right decisions that have a positive impact on their work and their job and their clients and their fellow team members. And however you want to work, absolutely great, but all you've got to remember is to have that positive impact and not have a negative one. And so we ask people to communicate and to collaborate and to work together to solve problems and complete projects and be able to work in tandem. But apart from that, it's up to people to work out how they're going to do that. So no one else steps in and kind of says, this is how it should work. It's very much like, you're adults, have adult conversations. Like, this isn't a parent-child relationship anymore. Like, we're trying to trust you to get things done. So show us that you can.
Yeah, though adults can have a lot of conflict with each other. So what happens, like what kind of organizational support do you have if colleagues can't reach agreement? Do they speak to a coach, or how does it work, or a peer, or it's not formally structured? How does it work when there is that tension and difference of opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, well, I suppose we're fortunate in that it hasn't really happened a huge amount, but if it did, then we do have the support networks available, like the coaches, like mediators within the team. I'm working on a conflict resolution process at the moment, which will be very similar to the way that the Birdzorg or Morningstar do it, who are these really progressive self-managing companies, whereby you can challenge someone directly and kind of conflict resolution that. And if that doesn't work, you move on to sort of mediation, all that kind of stuff. So there will be more of a defined process for that in the future, because as we grow, that will become necessary. I suppose we've got these sort of plans to sort of double in size over the next couple of years. So there will be more growing pains because of that. And conflict may be one of those things that we do find later down the line. I suppose we're fortunate that we haven't had it, but there are channels that you can go to if there are issues. We just encourage people to be direct and honest and open with each other. And if they do find something frustrating, or the way that someone works isn't working for them, then just speak to them one-to-one and kind of resolve that. And that's the way that any good sort of, I suppose, self-managing adult company should work, is kind of creating that environment where you can talk to each other and not be afraid to.
Yeah, I imagine some viewers are like, yeah, this is what we do. And then other viewers will be like, oh, that would be so nice where we work. Okay. So we're going to do, I think from next month, we're going to focus on specific topics so that we can like really go deep. So I can imagine it will have sessions on conflict resolution, or breaking down the roles from the manager to others. So like opportunities to go deep. In the meantime, to finish this one, first of all, thank you. Like, you've been properly generous. Like, I genuinely believe you. Like, you've said that you want to help others learn from what you're going through. So thank you for that. if people would like to, just before the last question, if people are thinking, oh, I want to follow this guy, I want to follow Luke, how can people follow you or stay in touch?
Yeah, so either Twitter, I think it's Luke Kyte 101, or LinkedIn. I'm available. So however you want
Great.
to sort of get in touch, then yeah, that's
I'll put a
fine.
link underneath. And so to see us out, so if someone wants to gets inspired and they're like, I want to influence my company's culture, what advice would you give them?
Um, the easy one is just start. There's so many. You can spend so long worrying about the outcomes or what might happen or all of these kinds of phantom futuristic things you see. So when we started, it was like, well, what happens if everyone works like whatever times they want and takes all their annual leave and never comes in the office? No one will be able to communicate, collaborate. It just won't work. It could be havoc. And you can dream up all of these situations and the worst case scenario for everything. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that just doesn't happen. The worst case situation doesn't happen. It's just what you think will happen because that's what you always thought. That's what that you've always kind of been trained in working, that's going to happen and that people will take the mick and will abuse the system. And so the best advice really is just to start, take it small. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like as I said, we started this back in 2017, 2018, and have continually tweaked systems and ways of doing things just to make it better. So you don't have to be perfect first time. Just start getting something in place, put a roadmap together, maybe some ideas that you want to do at the company, what's not working, speak to the team, maybe have 5 or 6 little things that you want to start with and grow it from there. And you'll soon kind of that the wheels will start them sort of turning in motion, and you'll get to a better place.
Really practical. Thank you. And with that, I think we should stop this so Cultivists can start something else. So Luke, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.